Earth is a pretty watery planet, but fresh water is relatively scarce and unevenly distributed. Considering its role in sustaining most terrestrial life, it makes sense that freshwater availability has determined where humans live for millennia. But humanity tends to be unsatisfied letting nature dictate our use of resources. So, within the bounds of our engineering prowess, we harness and tame water to meet our needs. We do this well enough that it becomes easy to take water for granted. We forget the profound ways it can define how and where we live, from where we get it to how we use it and its path to its last stop before returning to the briny ocean.
Well, anybody who's setting up a camp or anything bigger in the wilderness knows they're going to have some source of water. Interestingly, amongst the people who were in the Portola expedition, the person who was the main record keeper was a priest who had spent a lot of his time down in Baja California, where water is very much an issue. So as he was hiking with the Portola expedition coming north, he was always attuned to where was the water, what was its quality, how much was there, and was this a suitable place for a mission. When they got to Santa Cruz, the San Lorenzo was one of the more substantial rivers that they had come across. The problem with it was in a deep arroyo, and that makes it hard to be useful for domestic purposes. You have to figure out how to get down to the water level and then haul it up. So imagine Crespi's delight, once they had crossed the San Lorenzo, to find that there was a creek with a lot of water in it, and it had come down from some higher ground, and so there was some power behind it. It could be diverted for the use of a settlement. So Crespi saw that creek as one of the best places that they had come across. They had saved names for what they were going to call the places where they would establish missions. And he decided he was going to call this creek Santissima Cruz Creek. So that isn't just Holy Cross, it's Most Holy Cross Creek, because he was so enthusiastic about the prospect of being able to put this creek to good use for a little settlement. So once they were to the stage of starting to build the mission here, they named it Santa Cruz, and Santa Cruz was that creek. When they finally decided that Mission Santa Cruz was to be built in 1791, they had help from Santa Clara and from San Jose, and also some help from Monterey. And so they converged on the spot that was about where the Portola expedition had crossed the river. Down in the lower part of the downtown area, where Laurel Avenue comes down and goes across the river, and maybe about Pacific Avenue. And of course that was where Santissima Cruz Creek came down. And it's sort of ironic that the reason that they loved that spot was there was so much natural water source there. But that first winter of 91-92, well, we have really rainy winters sometimes still here. But it was so much that what little bit they got established in the fall of 91 got wiped out. When they came, they noted that there weren't any Native Americans down on that plateau. You'd think, you might have looked to the long-term residents where they chose to have their, places to live. So they knew if they were going to have a permanent settlement here, they had to go to higher land. They realized they could divert some of the springs and have a good fresh water supply on what is now Mission Hill. Even in the winter of 91-92, when things were getting flooded down on the flats. Somebody had scouted out what was the situation with various springs up here in the Westlake area and had an idea of combining the output of some of those springs into one ditch that went down the hill parallel to what we call High Street. High Street didn't get named until 1866. People called it the high road to the redwoods.
It's worth taking a moment to acknowledge that even if you live in Santa Cruz, you've probably never heard of Santissima Cruz Creek, and even if you know it by its more modern name of Laurel Creek, you might not know much about it. How is it that the namesake of our town is so lost to history? Well, the answer is that it's been pretty well hidden away. So let's get to know it better by navigating it. We'll start at the Dodero Springs, where it empties into Dodero Creek. Here the creek begins at a spring and passes through the Calcar Pond. It drains to Dodero Creek, which passes under the Springtree Bridge, where it exits into a wooden flume. The flume carries the creek to a private residence. And the Gun Ponds, named after an early resident of the property. Here the creek goes underground in a culvert to cross Spring Street and enters into the McGranahan Pond. It flows through the backyards of a number of homes on Ortolan Avenue and then crosses Highland Avenue, goes under a house, and exits a backyard onto High Street. It crosses High Street and it flows through another private home and down the steep hill to Escalona Drive, where it crosses and goes under yet another house, and then flows through the backyards of homes along Hollywood Avenue. Now it heads to King Street, where it merges with other tributaries of Laurel Creek. It then flows underground, hidden from view on King Street. It then crosses King Street near Laurel Street and reemerges in a neighbor's backyard. After passing through the backyards of homes on Laurel Street, it crosses Cleveland and emerges on the other side to be channelized in a concrete structure. It passes through the backyards of more homes on Laurel Street, eventually coming out at the food bin, crossing underneath Mission Street to the old home of Emily's Bakery, where it unceremoniously enters another channel. It again becomes a lovely creek in the backyard of homes on Laurel Street on its way to California Street. After crossing California, the water begins to cascade down Laurel Hill. This is where Father Crespi most likely first saw Santissima Cruz Creek. Here the water flows out of a large culvert and flows into the Babbling Brook Inn. When it exits the Babbling Brook property, it flows past other homes, and then it crosses down into Shelter Lagoon, where Laurel Creek approaches the end of its 2-mile journey. Finally, the creek opens up into the broad waters of Neary Lagoon, which is a popular home for many different types of ducks and other birds. In the dry season, when water flowing into Neary Lagoon is light, the lagoon drains to the water treatment plant, which cleans it before piping it offshore into the bay. But in the rainy season, there's too much water for the treatment facility, so a gate is opened to allow water to flow through a trench to a pipeline under the Santa Cruz Wharf roundabout to Cowell Beach, where these gates open to let the untreated water end its journey to the bay.